In a hole in the ground in a car park in the centre of the English city of Leicester, archaeologists believe they may have found the answer to a puzzle that has endured the centuries. The final resting place of King Richard III.
What if one of England's most infamous kings wasn't exactly who history said he was? The discovery of King Richard III's skeleton under a parking lot shattered more than just bones. It cracked open centuries-old myths and revealed hidden fractures in royal bloodlines. DNA testing confirmed his identity, but also uncovered genetic surprises that question the authenticity of England's royal lineage and the very foundation of power.
Archaeologists in Britain say they've made an astonishing find. They believe they've uncovered the remains of long-lost royalty. He happens to be King Richard III.
Could centuries of recorded history about succession, legitimacy, and heritage be built on human error or deliberate obfuscation? This story digs deep into DNA's power to rewrite history and exposes uncomfortable truths about monarchy, identity, and the fragile nature of so-called pure bloodlines. The discovery of Richard III's remains. In 2012, beneath an ordinary parking lot in Leicester, England, archaeologists uncovered a discovery once thought impossible: human remains believed to be those of King Richard III. This find stunned historians and scientists alike, not only because of where it was located, but also for the implications it held for English history. The area had been built over centuries, erasing much of the medieval landscape, yet the skeleton emerged nearly perfectly preserved. The team from the University of Leicester worked meticulously, driven by the hopes of confirming one of Britain's long-lost monarchs. What made this discovery even more remarkable was the near-impossible odds. The dig was sparked by the dedication of Philip Langley and the Richard III Society, who championed the search for the final resting place of the king. They zeroed in on a site marked with the letter R, a connection many dismissed as a coincidence. Yet, in the first trench itself, the archaeologists uncovered a skeleton showing signs that suggested it was no ordinary remains. What lay beneath that car park challenged centuries of assumptions and rewritten history. Initially, the team met the discovery with mounting disbelief. It was unlike previous ventures into medieval history. The idea that they could literally pinpoint the lost king's body seemed too good to be true. The skeleton's features and location combined bore an uncanny match to historical clues, stirring a worldwide wave of excitement. But finding the bones was only the beginning. The real scientific challenge was proving, beyond doubt, that these were the remains of King Richard III. For years, Richard had been depicted as a villain with a twisted spine, often vilified in literature and folklore. Now, physical evidence might shed light on who he really was, but first, science had to confirm the identification. The skeleton showed signs of battle injuries and scoliosis, fitting the detailed descriptions of the king's final hours and physical condition. The narrative was starting to take shape, but this was only the first piece of the puzzle. The difficulty lay in getting beyond the bones to confirm identity. Centuries had passed, and the burial had been near forgotten. Without clear records or a marked grave, historical certainty seemed elusive. The discovery was crucial, but the skeptics remained. Would science be able to prove once and for all that the skeleton beneath Leicester's parking lot truly belonged to England's last Plantagenet king? Experts employed a variety of forensic tools, but one method stood out above all: DNA analysis. This approach promised objective data, capable of connecting the centuries-old remains to living descendants. Yet, DNA testing would reveal far more than just identity. It would expose cracks in the perceived royal lineage that no one expected. The excitement about the discovery soon evolved into a much deeper intrigue. The remains were studied exhaustively, with every possible clue extracted from bones, teeth, and artifacts found nearby. Anthropologists identified wounds consistent with battle, supporting historical accounts of Richard's death at Bosworth in 1485. The spine's curvature perfectly aligned with historical depictions, contradicting exaggerated claims of deformity. Each finding seemed to weave together fact with history's threads, but still, proof required genetic confirmation. The search for Richard had taken decades and involved many dead ends. This discovery was a breakthrough not just for archaeology, but for history itself. Confirming the find meant revisiting stories written long ago and questioning their accuracy. Yet the most astonishing revelations were still to come. What DNA would ultimately reveal would rewrite understanding of royal ancestry and lineage in ways no one anticipated. The fascination surrounding this discovery was not only about one lost king, but about how science could challenge centuries of accepted truth. It was a reminder that history is not static. It evolves with every new piece of evidence, sometimes revealing surprises beneath the surface we thought we knew so well. Confirming identity through DNA. DNA testing became the cornerstone of proving the skeleton's identity, focusing first on mitochondrial DNA, which is inherited maternally. Scientists traced a female line of descent from Richard's sister, Anne of York, to living relatives today. Two distant relatives, Michael Ibsen and Wendy Doldig, shared a direct maternal lineage spanning over 14 generations. Their DNA provided a vital link, allowing researchers to compare their mitochondrial DNA with that extracted from the skeleton's remains. Mitochondrial DNA proved invaluable because it remains relatively unchanged over many generations, making it an ideal marker for tracing maternal lines. This type of DNA is abundant in cells, increasing the likelihood of its preservation over centuries, a crucial factor given the age of the remains. The match was astonishingly precise. Michael Ibsen's mitochondrial DNA matched exactly, while Wendy Doldig's differed by only one base pair, a difference consistent with normal mutation rates over time. This near-perfect genetic match gave a statistical certainty of 99.999% that the skeleton belonged to Richard III, or a very close maternal relative. To further strengthen this conclusion, scientists cross-referenced the mitochondrial sequences with over 26,000 European samples, finding no close match elsewhere. This eliminated the possibility of mistaken identity and confirmed the skeletal remains with extraordinary confidence. The bone analysis also reinforced the DNA findings. The skeleton showed signs of scoliosis, consistent with historical records that described Richard's physical form, including a curved spine that caused uneven shoulders. In addition, injuries consistent with battle trauma, including cuts to the skull and other bones, aligned perfectly with the known circumstances of Richard's death at the Battle of Bosworth. This multidisciplinary evidence painted a compelling picture that linked anatomy to annals. Unlike nuclear DNA, mitochondrial DNA is passed down only through mothers, meaning it cannot confirm paternity. Still, its stability across centuries makes it the best tool for confirming identities in ancient remains. The reliance on this form of DNA was partly due to the complexity of tracing male lines, which would soon reveal unexpected complications in Richard III's paternal heritage. But for identity confirmation, mitochondrial DNA was key. The relatives involved were ordinary individuals unaware of their royal connection until contacted through genealogy research. Learning about their ties to a medieval king was profound, bridging centuries and reshaping personal histories. Their participation in confirming Richard's identity was a unique testament to how modern genetics can reach back across time to solve long-standing mysteries. This finding marked one of the most successful examples of combining genetic science and archaeology to identify a historically significant figure. Beyond proving the skeleton's identity, it opened new avenues for understanding lineage, the accuracy of historical records, and the complex nature of heredity over many generations. While mitochondrial DNA solidly confirmed identity, it raised questions about the paternal tree that demanded further exploration, questions that the next phase of testing would confront with surprising results. Understanding the maternal lineage was only half the story. The male lineage held secrets that would shake assumptions to their core. the Y chromosome mystery. When scientists examined the Y chromosome, inherited from father to son, they encountered a startling contradiction. They expected the skeleton's Y chromosome to match that of living male descendants, tracing their lineage back to Richard III's grandfather, but the results did not align. Instead of confirming direct paternal descent, the DNA showed a complete mismatch, indicating a previously unknown break in the male bloodline somewhere along the centuries. Researchers focused on 5 living males descended from Henry Somerset, 5th Duke of Beaufort, believed to share the same male lineage as Richard III. These men predominantly shared a common Y haplogroup, R1BU152, consistent with documented ancestry. In contrast, the skeleton's DNA belonged to a much rarer haplogroup, GP287. This discrepancy revealed that despite documented genealogies, at least one event disrupted the assumed biological lineage. This phenomenon is known scientifically as a false paternity event, when the recorded father is not the biological father. Although it sounds scandalous, such breaks in lineage were statistically likely over many generations and were probably common occurrences in history. Studies estimate that false paternity rates could average around 2% per generation, leading to a significant cumulative chance over 19 generations. As in this case, the discovery was unsettling because it cast doubt on the long-standing accuracy of royal bloodlines, traditionally thought to be pure and unbroken. If even this well-documented line contained such a break, other royal family trees could harbour unknown disruptions. This challenged the foundation of hereditary monarchy, where legitimacy depends heavily on direct descent. More surprisingly, one of the tested male descendants of the Beaufort line had a different and even more divergent haplogroup, M1170, suggesting an additional false paternity event occurred even more recently. This reinforced the delicate and fragile nature of pure bloodlines, even among nobility. These findings brought a humanizing and complex dimension to ideas of inherited power and lineage. The scientific revelations echoed through both genetic and historical circles, unsettling scholars who had accepted genealogies as factual. If a break occurred, possibly between Edward III and John of Gaunt, central figures to the royal lineages, questions arose about the legitimacy of the entire Lancastrian line, including monarchs such as Henry IV, Henry V, and Henry VI. This would also affect the legitimacy of the Tudor dynasty, which claimed descent through this line. At the heart of some medieval rumours was John of Gaunt, who was whispered to potentially be not the biological son of Edward III, but allegedly the result of a swap involving a Flemish butcher's child. While seemingly fantastical, the DNA evidence gave a new lens through which to view these old stories, lending them a curious credibility and prompting historians to reconsider their narratives. Despite these revelations, historians emphasize that Henry VII's right to rule was established more by conquest and political alliance than by bloodline alone. His marriage to Elizabeth of York united competing factions and helped cement his claim. Still, the genetic findings expose how monarchies, often seen as embodiments of pure lineage, are subject to the unpredictable forces of biology and history. This DNA mystery serves as a powerful reminder that hereditary legitimacy is not always as clear-cut as written records suggest. It humanizes royal figures and reveals how history itself can be shaped by chance, secrets, and complex family stories that endure beneath centuries of politics and power struggles. False paternity and royal lineage. The surprising discovery of a mismatch in the Y chromosome raised a complex question. How common is false paternity, especially in royal families long presumed to have pure bloodlines? False paternity events occur when the socially recognized father is not the biological one, a phenomenon more common than many realize, even among nobility. Scientific studies estimate that the average rate of such events is roughly 2% per generation, though some researchers suggest it could be slightly higher. Over centuries and generations, these small percentages multiply, making disruptions in lineage quite probable rather than exceptional. Considering there are 19 generations between King Richard III and the modern descendants used for comparison, statistical models predict about a 16% chance that a false paternity event occurred somewhere along this line. This challenges the once almost sacred notion of unbroken royal bloodline continuity. The idea that a single genetic mismatch could rewrite history destabilizes the foundation on which many royal claims rest. It is a reminder that lineage and inheritance, often seen as absolute, are vulnerable to human complexities. Even more revealing was the finding that one of the 5 male descendants tested showed an entirely different Y haplogroup, indicating a separate false paternity event within just a few generations. This second occurrence underscores how fragile and intricate claims of pure blood can be, even in families carefully documented and scrutinized over centuries. Royalty, often idealized as paragons of genetic exclusivity, were susceptible to the same errors, secrets, and surprises that affect any family. Historically, such breaks in lineage were sometimes covered up or simply unrecorded, especially in eras when social legitimacy mattered more than biology. Marriages, political necessities, and even infidelities could introduce discontinuities without leaving obvious traces in the historical record. These hidden disruptions were unlikely to undermine daily life for contemporaries, but now pose significant questions for modern genealogists and historians interpreting the past. The concept of false paternity invites a more nuanced approach to understanding royal genetics. It emphasizes the humanity behind the crowns, flawed, unpredictable, and often shaped by chance rather than pure blood. The scientific revelation humanizes these figures, framing them within the context of complex family dynamics over time, rather than as symbols of uninterrupted heritage. For historians, this reality complicates long-held beliefs about legitimacy and succession. The notion that power and rule followed an unbroken genetic path is challenged, opening discussions about the constructed nature of monarchy. If lineage is sometimes uncertain, then political power may have relied equally on conquest, diplomacy, and circumstance, rather than inherited right alone. This idea can also explain some of the conflicting historical rumors circulating around figures like John of Gaunt, whose paternity was questioned even in his own time. While tales of swapped infants or illegitimate births seemed folkloric, such DNA evidence lends new perspective to these stories. What was once dismissed as hearsay may, in fact, reflect hidden truths entangled in royal histories. Understanding the prevalence and consequences of false paternity reshapes how genealogies are interpreted. It calls for caution in assuming a pristine hereditary chain, and invites a broader view that accounts for human realities across generations. This informed skepticism provides a valuable lens through which to reassess the royal family trees that have governed much of Europe's history. Though difficult for some to accept, these revelations prompt a deeper reflection on how history is recorded and retold. They remind us that records, whether genetic or written, are subject to errors, omissions, and social constructions. In the case of King Richard III, science has posed uncomfortable questions about the nature of lineage that historians must now confront. The shockwaves from these genetic breaks extended far beyond the lab, shaking the foundations of royal history and leading to intense scrutiny of England's medieval dynasty. Questioning the Lancastrian and Tudor lines. The implications of a disrupted Y chromosome between Richard III and his supposed descendants ripple through the heart of English royal history, particularly casting doubt on the Lancastrian and Tudor dynasties. If the break occurred between Edward III and John of Gaunt, as some speculate, it calls into question the legitimacy of the entire Lancastrian line, including famous monarchs like Henry IV, Henry V, and Henry VI. Since the Tudor monarchs claimed descent from this same line through John of Gaunt, their royal lineage, too, faces uncertainty. This is more than a genealogical technicality. It challenges centuries of accepted history and authority. The Tudors, especially Henry VII, solidified their rule not only through military conquest, but also by emphasizing their ancestry.
So you have to take the characteristics that you know about, in this case, by looking at the DNA of living individuals and comparing that with DNA samples.
But if DNA evidence undermines that genealogy, it forces historians to reconsider how much of royal legitimacy depended on bloodlines versus power and politics. Rumours have long swirled around John of Gaunt's paternity, including whispers that he might have been the child of a Flemish butcher and a substitute in royal lineage. While such stories may sound like medieval gossip, the genetic discrepancies revealed by modern science give these tales unexpected weight. It suggests that even the most proud claims of royal descent may have been built on shaky foundations or deliberate obfuscation. Despite these genealogical uncertainties, Henry VII's ascent to the throne was achieved through conquest and political savvy, rather than unquestioned hereditary right. His victory over Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth and later marriage to Elizabeth of York, uniting rival Lancaster and York factions, helped cement his claim and foster a fragile peace in England. This political manoeuvring became as vital as any blood ties. The question then arises, if bloodlines were so complex and potentially flawed, what truly determined kingship? Historians emphasize that monarchy often hinged on seizing moments of opportunity, forging alliances, and maintaining control. Royal power was as much about circumstance and strategy as it was about ancestry, leaving lineage as one factor among many in the struggle to rule. Modern genetic findings only reaffirm that the clarity of royal lineage is often an illusion. Successive generations of political alliances, marriages, and conflicts have shaped the monarchy, weaving a tapestry that is not purely hereditary. The concept of pure blood may be more myth than reality, complicating the narratives handed down through history. In light of this, the Tudor dynasty's claim to the throne takes on new dimensions. Their legitimacy may rest more on military triumph and political consolidation than on unbroken royal descent. This underlines the fragile nature of hereditary monarchy and highlights how power dynamics often overshadowed genetic heritage. Public reactions to these revelations have ranged from curiosity to discomfort, as centuries-old beliefs about monarchy and legitimacy are questioned. The emotional impact touches on identity and tradition, notions deeply ingrained in cultural history. Understanding that even royal bloodlines can be complicated reminds us that history is shaped by human imperfections. Ultimately, these discussions force a reassessment of how power is legitimized and sustained. They invite us to see monarchy not as an immutable lineage, but as a complex, sometimes fragile institution shaped by many factors: biological, political, and social. The story of Richard III's DNA challenges us to rethink the past and reconsider how history is written and remembered. What the genetic findings reveal about rightful succession reflects a blend of biology and history, shedding light on the human stories behind crowns and crowns behind history. Revisiting Richard's physical image. For centuries, King Richard III was cast as a villain, deformed, ruthless, and physically crippled, a portrayal deeply embedded in literature, art, and Tudor propaganda. His image as a hunchback with a twisted spine became almost a defining characteristic, fueling stories that painted him as a malevolent usurper. Yet the discovery and scientific examination of his skeleton tell a very different tale, one grounded in factual evidence rather than myth. Richard did indeed suffer from scoliosis, a curvature of the spine, but it was far less severe than popular imagination suggested. The skeletal remains demonstrated that while one shoulder was higher than the other, Richard's overall physique was robust and strong. Muscle attachments on the bones indicated he was physically fit and well-muscled, capable of enduring the rigors of medieval warfare. This evidence directly contradicts centuries of exaggerated claims about his frailty and deformity. Instead, he appears to have been a capable soldier, active and resilient despite his spinal condition. The discovery that Richard's skeleton bore marks of battle wounds reinforced the image of a warrior king who died fighting on the battlefield, not a feeble, sinister manipulator hidden away in a court. Cuts and trauma consistent with the Battle of Bosworth, including injuries to the skull and ribs, illustrated a violent end matching historical accounts. These scars tell a story of conflict and bravery, rather than of weakness and villainy. Complementing the physical evidence was genetic information revealing probable hair and eye color. DNA analysis suggested Richard had blue eyes and likely blonde hair in youth.
And the third bits of DNA that I was interested in are bits of DNA that we know can be used to predict quite accurately somebody's hair and eye color. The reason why that's interesting is because there's no contemporary portraits of Richard,
which may have darkened with age. This detail challenges many historical portraits and descriptions showing him with darker features, likely altered by later artists to fit a specific narrative. Such inaccuracies helped shape a sinister and unsettling image that political rivals exploited. Historians now recognize that these visual distortions were not accidental. Tudor propagandists, seeking to legitimize their rule, deliberately portrayed Richard as malevolent and physically grotesque to justify their conquest. By demonizing their predecessor, they bolstered their own authority and rewrote history to suit their agenda. This propaganda deeply influenced cultural memory for centuries. The newfound understanding humanizes Richard III, revealing him as a complex individual shaped by the realities of his time rather than a one-dimensional villain. His story becomes not just about power and politics, but also about the vulnerabilities and resilience of a real person. The science allows us to peel back layers of myth and confront the truth behind the legend. This shift in perception invites reassessment of many historical figures whose reputations might have been similarly altered by political necessity or cultural bias. It underscores the importance of evidence-based history over literary or artistic portrayals. Richard's case is a compelling example of how science can bring clarity to the shadows of history. Recognizing Richard's true physical condition alters how we view his leadership and legacy. Rather than a crippled tyrant, he emerges as a strong, determined king whose real challenges went far beyond his appearance. This recognition opens the door to a more balanced and empathetic understanding of his reign and downfall. Ultimately, the fusion of forensic science, DNA analysis, and historical research transforms Richard III's image from a fearful caricature into a nuanced figure, one whose story reflects the complexities of humanity as much as the politics of medieval England. The revelations about his physicality also lead us to reflect on the narratives shaped by those who followed him, opening a window into the power of image-making in history. Political motivations behind Richard's legacy. The dramatic differences between Richard III's scientific profile and his notorious historical reputation raise an inevitable question. Why was his legacy so thoroughly maligned? The answer lies deeply rooted in the turbulent politics of the late 15th century. After Richard's death at the Battle of Bosworth in 1485, Henry Tudor claimed the throne as Henry VII, initiating the Tudor dynasty. To solidify their rule, the Tudors faced the challenge of legitimizing conquest and justifying Richard's removal from power. This context shaped the narrative about Richard for centuries to come. The Tudor regime was motivated to depict Richard as the embodiment of evil and illegitimacy. Portraying him as a deformed villain served not only a political purpose but also a moral one, framing Henry VII as a restorer of rightful order. This portrayal justified the violent overthrow and helped garner popular support. Art, literature, and early histories became tools for preserving this vilification. William Shakespeare famously cemented Richard's villainous image with his play Richard III, which dramatized the king as sinister, manipulative, and physically monstrous. While Shakespeare's work greatly influenced popular culture, it also reflected and amplified Tudor propaganda. The play became one of the most enduring depictions of Richard, shaping how generations perceived him. Historians now believe Shakespeare's portrayal was less a factual account and more a strategic creation aligned with Tudor political objectives. These distortions demonstrate how culture and power intertwine, with literature serving as a vehicle for political narratives. The success of this characterization helped obscure truths that scientific discoveries have only recently begun to recover. The politics behind Richard's legacy extended beyond his death, affecting how history was recorded and taught. Early Tudor historians reinforced these negative images, ensuring that Richard's reign was remembered primarily through a lens of villainy and moral failure. These narratives overshadowed any recognition of his administrative or military abilities. This campaign of character assassination illustrates the potency of historical storytelling and its impact on collective memory. It reminds us that history is often shaped not just by facts, but by the needs and agendas of those in power. In Richard's case, a carefully constructed image served to legitimize a new dynasty. Even centuries later, these political motivations echo, influencing how we interpret and understand the past. Scientific revelations challenging Richard's vilification encourage a re-evaluation of how history is crafted and the importance of questioning dominant narratives. The case shows that history is not fixed, but is an ongoing conversation shaped by evidence as well as interpretation. This recognition encourages broader reflection on the histories of other figures whose legacies may likewise be filtered through political agendas. Richard's story becomes a lens through which we can examine the intersections of power, memory, and truth. It challenges us to seek a fuller, more accurate understanding beyond inherited prejudices. Ultimately, reconsidering Richard III's legacy forces us to confront our assumptions about history and authority. It is a reminder that truth can be buried beneath layers of political spin, waiting to be uncovered through rigorous inquiry and open-mindedness. The intersection of politics and history remains as relevant today as it was over 5 centuries ago. The tangled web of fact, fiction, and political necessity invites us to look deeper, questioning all we think we know about the stories that shape our world. DNA's role in rewriting history. The discovery of King Richard III's remains and the genetic revelations that followed have done more than solve a centuries-old mystery. They have reshaped how we understand history. DNA has become a tool capable of cutting through myth, legend, and politics to expose deeper truths about identity and lineage. What once seemed like unshakable historical fact is now open to reinterpretation in light of genetic evidence, shifting our view of monarchy and heritage. These findings reveal how fragile royal bloodlines truly are. The notion of a pure, continuous lineage is complicated by hidden breaks in paternity, unrecorded by history, yet traceable in DNA. This fragility humanizes rulers once cloaked in divine legitimacy, reminding us that power often rested on social constructs as much as biology. Such discoveries invite historians and the public alike to revisit old narratives with renewed skepticism. The implications extend beyond royalty. If even monarchs' genealogies can fracture, what does that mean for ordinary families? It underscores how all family histories, shaped by secrets, coincidences, and forgotten events, are complex tapestries rather than linear stories. DNA testing, once limited to science or medicine, now serves as a bridge between past and present, connecting people to ancestral truths once inaccessible. Richard III's case also highlights how political agendas shape historical memory. History, recorded through texts and art, often reflects the biases of those in power rather than objective truth. The Tudor portrayal of Richard as a villain dominated for centuries, yet genetic and archaeological evidence paints a different picture, challenging propaganda and prompting a reassessment of collective memory. DNA analysis does not simply rewrite history, it deepens it. By complementing traditional research with biological evidence, science offers tangible data that can confirm or complicate existing accounts. In doing so, it gives voice to silent witnesses within ourselves, enriching our understanding of humanity's shared story. Yet, even the most advanced tools cannot eliminate uncertainty. History remains an interpretive discipline shaped by bias, omission, and perspective. Genetic revelations remind us that absolute certainty is elusive. What matters is maintaining openness to new evidence and the willingness to revise what we think we know. The fusion of science and history marks a new era, one that challenges myths, corrects distortions, and strengthens our connection to the past. Ultimately, Richard's rediscovery teaches that behind every grand narrative lies a human story. Flawed, surprising, and profoundly real. Science has opened a door to the past, inviting us to question not only what happened, but why it was told the way it was. King Richard III's discovery and the DNA revelations that followed teach us that history is never set in stone. Perfect lineages and clear stories often give way to complexity and surprise. As we uncover more truths, our understanding of the past and ourselves deepens. If you enjoyed this journey into science and history, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that challenge what we think we know.